We are back to our Christian apologetics class. Since we have been started, we're on the first part of this, and that is proving there is a God. There has to be someone over nature, far greater than nature, that put this all together, who spoke these things into existence. That would be every element, every atom, and holds it all together. There has to be. And it is impossible for any of this to have just occurred on its own naturally. There can't be nature without a God who has created that nature. It is impossible otherwise. Now we come to our quote for this morning, and this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. This is from Dr. Robert Jastrow. He's an astronomer. This is from his book, God and the Astronomer, in 1978. I love this quote. At this moment, it seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain on the mystery of creation. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. That is a great quote, and that would be a nightmare. The very ones that you ridiculed, you climb over there and you see all these people of the past were right. They were right all along. And notice what he says in this, live by his faith in the power of reason. Actually, I would add to that, it's not living by the faith of the power of reason, because reason actually would take you to the understanding that the laws that govern all of physics keep this material realm in check. And it cannot create itself. The very laws say the world, life, none of this can create itself. And it is a faith to say that there is no God. And it is not just faith in reason, because I think it's in fact flawed reason, but it is faith in others getting it right. It is humanism. And this is where humanism leads. It's on the scientific side, supposed scientific side, is to prove that God doesn't exist. This is humanism, and this is believing that we can solve every problem, that we can answer every question, and we need no God whatsoever, and we can prove our own existence without God, and no, you can't. As we showed from Isaac Asimov in his quote last week, he said he could not prove there was no God. And he said, emotionally, I am an atheist. Well, there's a lot of science involved in that. But we're going to read very briefly Psalm 104, beginning in verse 10. He sends the springs into the valleys, they flow among the hills. They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. By them the birds of heavens have their home. I love this particular verse, or this phrase, this sentence in it. They sing among the branches. He didn't even mention trees. We know what it is. We know what it is. That the birds of heaven have their home because of these springs, and they sing among the branches. He waters the hills from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your works. He causes the grass to grow for the cattle and vegetation for the service of man, that he may bring forth food from the earth. All of this is for the service of man. Every bit of it is. This world, as we have made mention, wasn't made for daisies, except someone by the name of Daisy. It wasn't made for daffodils. I just use it. Wasn't made for cattle. Was not made for the birds of the air. Wasn't made for anyone like that. anything like that. It's made for man. It is made for us. Now, last week we left on this subject, and we're going to get into this very quickly and continue on. This is, where does life come from? And last week we discussed that Darwin doesn't even address this question because he knows he can't. He can't address it. Therefore, he just takes it for granted that life is. Now let's talk about variations of birds or of turtles or whatever he wants to talk about. Now, last week we talked about this primordial soup. This was started in 1924 and then 1929. Primordial soup. This is the just so story for the beginning of life on earth. This is an atheistic story. This is not the only one. Not everyone gives into this. Just like not every atheist believes in the Big Bang. Something had to have happened, but they see it. It couldn't have been the Big Bang. All right, but this is something that many through time have hung their hat on, this primordial soup. And it goes like this. How do we have life? Well, back in billions of years ago, there was a pool of water with some other things in it. You would have clay, mud, dirt, rock. There's nothing alive in it. Because at this point, there would be nothing living. Now, I'm talking about what the atheists say. I'm not talking about Genesis at all. I'm not talking about God creating the world at the moment, but how atheists would say life came to be. Because life is an enormous mystery. We cannot replicate it. We cannot just take something that's dirt and mud. And I remember seeing Carl Sagan years ago in his television program that he had this big plexiglass container. And he was talking about everything that we're made out of. And he said, we have so much percentage of water. And so he throws in water into this plexiglass container. And we're so much of carbon. And he throws in like charcoal. He throws in carbon and just, or whatever, and it becomes black. And then we are such a this and such a that, and then he swirls it around, and he doesn't get a human. He gets something. Somebody's going to have to clean up the mess, is what it comes down to. Somebody's going to have to clean that up. And so this is the idea. In this billions of years ago, then lightning strikes around this pool, or strikes the pool, and amino acids are created from that lightning strike. And as we said last week, amino acids do not life make. That's original for this moment. But amino acids, they don't. And it is a mystery, because life is far more than amino acids. And you go down to the most tiniest, basic sort of life form of bacteria and the like, and you'll see they're not just amino acids. They're a whole lot more than that. Now, we didn't get into this, but last week just introduced Michael Behe, a biochemist, and he came up with this idea of irreducible complexity. That the living cell is too complex, far too complex for it just to have occurred, because you have to have all these things occurring and existing at the same time and working together. And I don't mean one cell and another cell. I mean inside the cell, all these different systems, just like you. We're gonna scale this up to you. All right, for you to be alive this moment, there are all these systems that have to work together, and simultaneously. You have a nervous system, you have a respiratory system, you have a pulmonary system, you have a digestive system, you have all these things about you. All of them have to be in place. You cannot live for very long at all if suddenly you didn't have a respiratory system, or one that it's either missing or it just stopped working. You're not living very long. So same way with any of these others. take something away, you don't live. All right, we can scale that now back down to the microscopic level of living tiny living organisms, and they are way too complex. This is Michael Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box, and this is where he writes about the fact of things being too complicated at the biochemical level, going way down. Now, here is my analogy. We will look at some cells in a minute, but this is my analogy. Let's talk about a factory. And it doesn't matter what the factory makes. All right, the factory makes something. It could be cars, it could be water heaters, it could be whatever you want it to be. Or it could be shingles. It doesn't matter. It can be. These are the things that this factory must have to function. And it has to all be in place simultaneously. It has to have a power source. It has to have energy power of some sort. Some sort. Even if we're going to go before electricity to steam, it's got to have the steam engines. Even if we go before steam, there's going to have to be power there somehow, whether it is by fire of wood, or you're just pure working of animals or water or humans. You've got to have the energy power that's there. You also have to have capital coming and going. There's got to be this flow of capital that goes both ways of where you have payment coming in and payment going out. Same thing concerning communication. Communication has to be going both ways. You can't get orders without some kind of communication, nor can you order anything without any kind of communication. There also has to be raw materials coming in constantly. You have to have maintenance and repair going on. You have to have workers, and all of these are large kind of categories. Workers, and we would mean skilled workers, workers that know what they're doing. They know how to do what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and you would have workers of every sort. That of those that are taking care of maintenance, yeah, that would be part of it. Those that would be doing the more menial things, and to those of more managerial things, they all have to be skilled. Then you have to have storage. You have to have some kind of storage. Raw material has to be stored. The finished product has to be stored until it's shipped out. We've already talked about communication. There's got to be a way to get rid of waste, because every sort of production, there is some kind of waste that is produced. You have shipping of the finished product. You have to have production machinery inside all this. And this is my list. There may be more in your list. There may be more that someone who actually runs a factory or sets up factories would know, no, you've missed out some things. But this is the point I'm making. The point I'm making is you take any one of these out, and it doesn't function for very long. Any one of them. Now, how long can you go without the workers? Well, that shuts it down pretty quick. All right, how long can you go without the raw materials? Until you run out and you don't have any more. You can't do anything. When you take any of these things out of the way, everything about this stops, and all must exist and function from the start, or you don't have a factory and you have to wait for something else to come. Well, when it comes to life, you don't have a cell that is just, or bacteria there, that's incomplete and it's waiting to be completed, somehow trying to figure it out what they need next. That's impossible. And to think that all this came by accident is also absurd. The one who built this knew what factories need. It's that simple. It's that simple. The one who put this all together knew what the factory had to have to produce whatever it was that was being produced, whether it's bread or whether it's trucks. It doesn't matter. But here we have this. The microscopic blob of jelly called the cell is a remarkable entity. The most remarkable thing about it is the very fact that it is alive, not with a murky primordial glow, but as fully and vibrantly alive as a tiger or an oak tree. In a remarkable miniaturization of life's functions, the cell moves, grows, reacts, protects itself, and even reproduces. To sustain this varied existence, it utilizes a tightly organized system of parts that is much like a tiny industrial complex. It has a central control point, power plants, internal communications, construction, and manufacturing elements. And this is from John Pfeiffer, and that is 1964, and that is from The Cell. Now, we look at this. Here is your basic bacteria. All right? And here are all the things that it has to have. And it must be in place simultaneously. And it's going to take more than a random lightning strike on clay and mud and water. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take more than just amino acids to do this. Far more, because the amino acids don't form this. They don't form it at all. And you have in it a coded message that is there. That is called DNA. DNA, and we will talk about this hopefully later. DNA is an encoded language. For an encoded language, there has to be, first off, a language. Languages just don't appear out of nothingness. You have to have intelligence to have a language. You have to. They don't come out of thin air. There's a language. Then comes the encoding of that language. That too requires an astonishing mind to do that. That to take the language, and now we're going to make a code out of it. Then you have to have the other side of that, of something functioning inside this that's going to take that DNA, decrypt it, decode it, and then follow the instructions that are in that language. Follow the instructions. And somehow all this came to be by a simple lightning strike. And then not only does this function with all this, including a DNA of language, not only does it do that, but it's surprisingly able to replicate itself. And now you have 2, and they replicate themselves, and now you have 4, and on and on and on. To think this happened accidentally is the product of a debased mind. Professing to be wise, they became fools. And as we said from the beginning of all this, if you throw away the greatest truth, the largest truth of which everything else comes off of, then you can throw away anything. You can throw away your own existence. You can throw away whatever. Now we come here to your basic human cell structure, where you see that it looks different, but there's more than one type of human cell. And of course we know that. There's much more. The cells in your liver are different from the cells in your lungs, which are different from the cells of your neurons, which are different from your cells of your stomach. They're all very, very different. Of your bones, skin, hair, there's all very different. And here is, this is your basic liver cell. It looks quite different. And here is your neuron. You got a lot of all these. And these all look quite different because they carry different functions. and they do it at an extraordinary level. Just actually a scary level, if you ask me, of doing things of it's very much like David said, it is above me. I cannot obtain it. It's beyond me. That everything here is too wonderful for me. I don't know how this happens, except that God does it. And God shows proof after proof after proof after proof, going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, or going further out and further out and further out and further out, that you see the fingerprints of God everywhere. And places such as Job, where God speaks to Job and he asks questions. And I wish we could go through those chapters there, but we don't have time today. But I would like for us to go. We're going to do just a little bit. But now we come into animal designs. And when God created, He created. He didn't make everything just homogeneous. That's blob 1, that's blob 2, that's blob 3. He made extraordinary things. He made large animals that would be enormous whales in the ocean. He made enormous dinosaurs such as Behemoth, which is in the book of Job. He made those that lived in swamps, described as such. He made the elk and the snow monkeys and birds and things that live in the sea, on the top of the sea, way down in the bottom of the oceans. He made all these various types of animals, and some of them, you can tell, have an extraordinary, I'm going to use the word aesthetic. I'm also going to use the word design to them for the eye, not just that they can function, and they can function as an animal, but there is a beauty to that bird. There is also, there's also a beauty to this monkey. Less than the bird, but there is. And look at the panda. The panda he's cute, and there's some things even cuter than the panda. It's like, you are too cute to even exist. Where did you come from? And you have the meerkats, which are, they're cute, and they are, it's hard not to laugh with them. But you have something like the elk, that is a noble beast. I don't have a lion on here, but that is a noble beast. And things such as elephants, or we've talked about some things are just intrinsically funny. Like monkeys are intrinsically funny. Watching monkeys and what they do, they're frightening. I don't want to get too close to them, but you don't know what they're going to do. But there are other things such as penguins, and be careful, penguins do bite. But penguins, just watching them, it's funny. They're funny creatures. And it is in the design really for our eyes. For our eyes. That's what it's there for. There is beauty in flowers for our eyes. There's beauty in mountains for our eyes. There's beauty that's found in animals. Now, granted, a spider's not too beautiful, and we can go through a number of things in the insect world not too beautiful. Butterflies are. I think bees are. But there are things that, they function, and some things, once again, for our eyes, once we begin to see it, are actually horrifying. Things at the bottom of the ocean, if you've seen an anglerfish, that term anglerfish I can come up with a better one than that. It does not give it justice as to what that thing looks like. But now we come to Psalm 50, 10, 11. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. Now, that is God speaking. He created them all. Now, we're going to Job. And in Job, I've just taken 2 animals mentioned in Job. Just 2. And we see from this of God knowing what He created. He knows what He created. And He knows that He's not giving everything about, obviously not. This is poetry, and He's not going too far in depth for talking to Job about it. He's not there to give a zoology class, but he does say this: the wings of the ostrich wave proudly, but her wings and pinions, but are her wings and pinions like the kindly storks. What does he mean? Proud feathers. But what can the stork do aside from deliver babies? What can the stork do that the ostrich can't do? Fly. That's exactly right. The ostrich has feathers but can't fly. But the ostrich can do something that the stork can't do. The ostrich can do something that the horse can't do. And he's going to make mention of it. Of course, if you can fly, okay, yeah, I'd rather fly than what the ostrich, what was say. For she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. And God makes mention of why this would be. She forgets that a foot may crush them, or that a wild beast may break them. She treats her young harshly as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without concern, because God deprived her of wisdom and did not endow her with understanding. God limited the ostrich, just like God limits an eagle. God limits an orangutan. God limits killer whales. He does. You know, a shark, if you're in the water with a shark, you got problems. But if you're on land with a shark, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to worry about. But, okay, notice what he says here. When she lifts herself on high, she scorns the horse and its rider. What does that mean? This is what she can do. What can an ostrich do? It can way outrun a horse. Ostrich is much faster than a horse. That's why in horse races they don't allow ostriches. All right? Because it would be no contest. Well, if you could train the ostrich to go around in a circle, that may be a problem. I don't know. But ostrich can go about 20 miles an hour faster than a horse. Even the fastest, much, much faster than a horse. Now we come to this next part about the horse. We talked about the horse. Now he is saying concerning the design of the horse that there are animals that have been designed for man and for the things that would occur in history. I want you to see this. Have you given the horse, and this is God talking to Job, have you given the horse strength? Have you clothed his neck with thunder? And of course the answer is no. And God is speaking to Job because through the book of Job, Job has gone through a massive trial, and he has friends that have come. They're not the best friends at this moment, saying this has happened to you because of sin. And Job has been saying, if it's been of sin, I want to plead my case to God. If that's the case, I want to plead my case. I want to plead it. And so God, he's already talked about, or previous to this, about where were you when the foundations of the earth were laid? Because I don't remember you being there. All right, where were you when the oceans were put in place and it was said this is as far as you proud waves can go. Where were you then? Where were you when all the sons of God sang in joy? Where were you? Because I don't remember you being there. Now, did you give the horse its strength? Can you frighten him like a locust? His majestic snorting strikes terror. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He gallops into the clash of arms. He mocks at fear and is not frightened, nor does he turn back from the sword. Now that tells me the horse was created full well knowing this thing is going to make cavalry. This thing is going to war and was made to do that and other things. Horses aren't just for warfare. But in this case, he's showing the strength and the courage of a horse. Which, by the way, elephants don't have. Elephants aren't quite as courageous as horses are. You think they would be, but when it comes to battle, Hannibal and others who were using war elephants discovered they can be thwarted because you can frighten elephants better than you can full-on cavalry charge from horses. And actually elephants are a lot harder to maintain than a horse anyway. But he mocks at fear. He's not frightened. He's not going to turn back from the sword. The quiver rattles against him, the glittering spear and javelin. He devours the distance with fierceness and rage, nor does he come to a halt because the trumpet has sounded. That's not the case with elephants, actually. That's one of the ways that that it was figured how to defeat an army with elephants is to frighten them with trumpets. And lots of it, and they hightail it, high trunk it. I don't know what an elephant does. But all right, at the blast of the trumpet, he says, "Aha!" He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of captains and shouting. He hears this, and this tells me that God knew full well what he was creating. Yes, he's creating a farm animal. He is creating transportation. He is doing that. Quick transportation. But not the only farm animal, and certainly not the only one that can pull a plow, and not the only one that can carry you around. There's more of those, but this tells me there was a purpose from the very beginning. Now, we go from horses to this. That's a weird looking horse, actually. To a giraffe. To a giraffe. Now, a giraffe is a very unique animal, and here is an engineering problem. Huge engineering problem. First off, and we'll get to this in a bit, you have the giraffe's head way up there. And anywhere from 8 to 10 or maybe even more feet, about right here, is a heart. That heart has to pump blood all the way up to his head, or he dies, or she dies. All right? You've got to have blood going uphill. Now, the distance from your heart to your head is not that far. All right, so you actually, if your body couldn't hold the heart of a giraffe, and if your heart was in a giraffe, the giraffe would die. Your heart cannot produce what the giraffes can. Now we'll get to that in just a, and there's more. There's more. Okay, you see his head's way up there. His hooves are way down here. You cut this animal here, that thing's going to bleed out. Quick. But they don't. They don't. Yeah, a giraffe is a very difficult animal to unless you have a high caliber rifle. They're very difficult to kill. If you're using spear or arrows or things like that, they are very, very difficult. Not that I have any personal knowledge of that. I've never gone to kill a giraffe. But let's talk about the just so story about how did the giraffe get its neck. And I know this from school and going way back, that the giraffe lived in an area where it had to get the leaves off the trees. And therefore, you have to have this development of a longer neck to where it can survive. It's got to be able to get those leaves off the trees. And the ones that had the shorter necks would die off. The ones with the longer necks would actually begin to thrive. And you have taller and taller and taller giraffes. All right? Might I suggest how stupid that story is? For this very simple reason. This whole thing's stupid. That thing can eat as much grass as a cow can, and it doesn't have a problem. It doesn't need the neck. All right, to think that it couldn't just simply go down and eat grass is stupid. It can. It can put its head down and eat as much as it wants. Now, here is the thing about this, and I've got this up here also for another reason. We talked about that heart about right here that has to have such extraordinary pressure, taking it up to the head of the giraffe so the giraffe doesn't pass out and just fall. And every time that it tries to stand back up, it just falls again. You have a very unsuccessful giraffe in doing that. But what happens when it does that? That pressure has to change, or that's a dead giraffe again. That's too much pressure now going 10 feet downhill. That's too much pressure, and it would kill over. It's not just passing out, it would die. Or that takes design. That's more than just stretching your neck up, wanting higher and higher branches to get their leaves. This takes design that is involved to where this thing can even survive. And in the giraffe's neck there is a system that is in place to take the excess pressure off of the circulatory system heading to the brain. And it's all the way down the neck that it's able to do that. Therefore, that is why a giraffe can do this and live. Giraffe can stand straight up and live. And when we were talking about its legs, if someone were to slash a leg, it doesn't bleed out because it has extraordinary tendons, it has extraordinary muscles that limit that flow of blood, aside from having a thick hide, limit that flow of blood coming out from that cut to where it doesn't just bleed out. And it wouldn't take long. It wouldn't take long if the protection wasn't already there. Okay, and this is just a thing concerning the heart and how it has to take everything uphill. Now, we're going to talk about Stephen Jay Gould. He was an atheist. And he is the one that he and another man came up with, we talked about it very briefly, punctuated equilibrium, trying to explain why are there gaps in the archaeological record between this animal, full-fledged this animal, and then now another fully fledged animal that according to evolution, this one is like the great ancestor. That this one, there should be all these different variations from one to the other, but there's not. And he came up with punctuated equilibrium, which that there would be times when you would go from this particular animal and then pop, now you're at another completely different animal, which means that just to put it in our terms, something that is very much an ape or very much a non-human gave birth to a human. And giving birth to one is not enough. You got to have two, and it better be male and female. You've got to. You've got to do that. Now, with him, basically what he's doing is a critique on creation, which is really funny. There's a lot of this that goes on, as though Stephen Jay Gould, how everything should work. And in this particular instance, it's called the panda's thumb. And what he said was that he knew that there had to be evolution because the panda's thumb is not what it should be for grabbing bamboo and eating. That its thumb was not developed well enough, and that he knew it couldn't be, if a wise God had created this, the panda's thumb would be different than what it was. Now, once again, how stupid this is. I'm sorry, this is stupid. All I have to say is, and yet there are pandas. Okay? Who are you to critique its thumb? It functions. It doesn't have to be spoon-fed by a squirrel or something that has a better thumb, like a chimpanzee, something that's got a better thumb, I suppose. It doesn't have to be fed by anybody else. It can handle itself. It survives in the wild. It's not as though they are a domesticated animal and cannot possibly live without a caretaker. They do. It reminds me of a documentary, and it is beautifully shot. Beautifully shot, and it is things of nature all over the world, and it was an enormous project, but it was so funny how often this would be said. This particular one that comes into mind were these elephants that lived, they had to cross a desert. And it was an extremely dry time of year. And they cross the desert. And to hear the narrator say, it is shocking how every year the elephants survive that crossing and make it to a lake, and they are okay. They had to dramatize it. They had to make it seem as though that it's a miracle. Every year they have managed to do this very thing. Obviously they can do it, or they would have died out. Obviously they can. We're not talking about humans. Humans probably would have a problem if they were trying to do that without packing water with them. They probably would die in the desert. But somehow those elephants don't. It's like they believe how nature should be, and that nature can't possibly take care of itself. If it's an accident, I guess it can't. But and here's just showing, and once again, incredibly cute, especially like this. It's all incredibly cute. That looks more menacing to me, especially seeing the claws. I don't know. I guess pandas can hurt you. I don't know. If you're dressed like bamboo, I think they would hurt you. But anyway, we will continue. And next week, matter of fact, next week we're going to talk about some astonishing things I had hoped that we would get out of animals today, but we're not going to. There's still some things I want to show you. There's still some things there. And I appreciate everybody being with us, and hopefully we can continue next week. Thank you.